So I'm delighted to be here with you folks. I've only been with you for a little while, but I love you a whole bunch already. I love you so much that I left Sophia, my 1-year-old, at home tonight without me there to put her to bed, which means she will not go to sleep for her mother. She will not go to sleep until I get home tonight. My wife will try to put her to bed, and at some point in that process, Sophia will jump up and say, "Party time!" And she will proceed to party until I get home. So I love you enough to subject my wife to that tonight. My favorite superhero is all moms everywhere, and especially my wife, Christina. She is the superhero of the world. God bless her. I was asked to share some good news with you, to share with you about joy. Well, I know some good news, so I'm very happy to do that. I know a lot of good news. Last weekend, I went to visit my friend Jimmy in prison. Jimmy's in the federal penitentiary. He has a mandatory 30-year sentence. He's 58 years old. He's been in for about 4.5 years, so Jimmy may not get out of there. So while I was on the way down to the federal pen, I was thinking, what good news can I bring Jimmy? How can I bring Jimmy some joy? And what I thought of was the letter of Paul to the Philippians. Anybody know where Paul was when he wrote that letter?
In prison.
He was in the Huskow, that's right. Anybody know the nickname of that letter to the Philippians? It's the Epistle of Joy. When Paul was locked up, writing to the Philippians, I couldn't bring my Bible with me. Couldn't bring my phone with me. The only thing I could bring with me into the federal prison was a pocket full of quarters for the snack machines. So I had to get some good news from Paul and get it right in here. Right? And it goes like this. Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again. Rejoice. The Lord is near. Have no anxiety about anything, but in everything, with prayer and supplication, make your request known to the Lord, and the peace of God, which passes all understanding, will fill your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus. Whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is gracious, if there is any excellence, and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things, and God's peace will be with you. God's peace will be with you. Jimmy was my best friend back in high school. That was a big deal to have a best friend like Jimmy, because I didn't have friends. I was raised in a family with a lot of brokenness, a lot of shame, a lot of alcoholism, and I didn't know how to fit in and get along with the kids, but that was okay because I had Jimmy. Jimmy was the most popular kid in the school. Everybody loved Jimmy, and Jimmy loved them too. And I was right next to Jimmy, so I was okay. I was good to go. And then Jimmy and I started tracking down on this drug and alcohol thing, and that got more and more and more out of hand. I wound up living on the streets, living in the weeds, living under bridges. Jimmy wasn't in quite as bad a shape as I was. He wound up getting sober. And he started coming and finding me in the weeds and taking me to those 12-step meetings. Saved my life. But then Jimmy couldn't stay sober. So he fought off and on with addiction and sobriety and relapse until finally got in a lot of trouble for selling a lot of drugs to support his drug-addicted lifestyle. So I want Jimmy to have the best news that I can bring him about joy, and I want you to have the best news that I can bring you about joy. Joy is the center of the gospel. When? Always. Rejoice in the Lord always. I say it again. Rejoice. The Lord is near. Why do we rejoice? Because Jesus Christ loves us. He gave his life to save us. He's living now among us to enlighten and strengthen and free us. Now, I want to share with you the greatest words of joy ever spoken in the whole history of the world. All of the words ever spoken. These are the greatest words of joy. And they were spoken by a man who had nails through his hands and his feet. And he said, "Today, you will be with me in paradise. This day, you will be with me in paradise." Do you ever think about the joy that was in Jesus' heart when he spoke those words? He came here and did everything that he did to be able to speak those words. Today, you will be with me in paradise. Today begins now. Its ultimate fulfillment will come in heaven, but it begins now. We don't have to wait until some point in the future to begin to experience this joy of being with Jesus. These are Paul's words to the Galatians and the Athenians. "I have been crucified with Christ, so that it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. It is in him that I live and move and have my being." Christ is in us now. This is the reason for our joy. Christ is with us now. We have his Spirit in us, and we rejoice. The angel says to the shepherds in the field, "Be not afraid. I bring you good news of great joy." Joy is the heart of the gospel. And a lot of people are reluctant to accept that, to appreciate that joy for Christians is always, and it's everywhere. And it's most especially in our times of suffering, our times of tragedy, and our greatest difficulties. What God specializes in is turning tragedy into treasure. That's his specialty. The joy doesn't come. The treasure doesn't come later on after the tragedy is all worked out and resolved. It's right there, in the middle of it. That's where it is. I'm the kind of a strange person that when tragedy happens in my life, I get excited. It's not that I don't feel the pain. I feel it. But I get excited because I know there is treasure there. There is treasure in that tragedy every time in my life. It's happened enough times. I'm 60 years old now. I've been through enough tragedy, and God has brought forth treasure. He has turned it into my greatest, most precious possession, the tragedy in my life. When I was strung out on drugs, when I was lost, Jimmy started taking me to those meetings, and I found people there who knew how to love me. And they taught me something very special about love that sometimes at church we're not as good at. We might need to learn this. Now, the 12-step groups got this from us. They got it from the church, but now we might need to get some of it back from them, right? What they taught me was there were people that would have loved me. There were people that wanted to love me. There were people that did love me. But I thought if they really knew the truth about me, they wouldn't love me. If they really knew, they wouldn't love me. And then I got to these 12-step groups, and what did I find? I found people who really knew. I found people who really knew the truth about me. They really did understand. And they loved me. They really knew me, and they really loved me. There is great power there. There is tremendous power in being loved by people who really know us. And then you know what happened next? They taught me how to do that for others. They taught me that the suffering that I've experienced, Bob Dylan said that, ain't it funny how people who suffer together have stronger connections than people who are most content. I found out that my suffering allowed me access into other people's hearts. My suffering is a key. It lets me into the lives of other people who suffer. It lets me into their hearts. They share with me, and then I get to experience that suffering being transformed into treasure. I experienced that in the 12-step groups. Then after I got sober, I'm racing through my story a little bit here. After I got sober, I got back together with this gal that I had been with back when I was all jacked up on the drugs and the drinking and all that stuff, and I'd gotten in a lot of trouble. I skipped over the part about all the trouble. I got in a lot of trouble. And more trouble than that. And a lot of it was wrapped up with this girl that I thought she could save me and she thought I could save her, and we couldn't save each other. We didn't know how to do that. So after I got sober, things got better. We got back together. And I still was very clueless in a whole lot of ways. And I didn't know how to treat women. I didn't understand God's plan for love and sex and marriage. She didn't either. That getting back together didn't work out well. She left me again. And this time I didn't want to get in all that trouble again. So this time I came up with a plan. My plan was, I know what I'll do. I'll ride my bicycle to Los Angeles and that'll make me feel better. So that's what I did. I got some saddlebags and put some stuff on my bike, and I took off on my summer break from school. By this time, I'd been to a few thousand 12-step meetings, and I got myself a scholarship to Emory, and life was going a whole lot better. And so summer break, I got on my bicycle, and I took off pedaling for LA. And I rode across those long roads through those forest in the south, and I rode across those long roads in Texas under that big Texas sky. And I got out there into the desert, and I rode across those long desert roads, and I drank a lot of water. And I started to experience a revelation of God in the beauty of His creation. And I started to experience God giving me a great gift, the beauty of all of creation, as a gift to me. And then I got up into the Rocky Mountains, and I was riding up in the Rocky Mountains one night, and I had been changed by this trip, by this riding. A lot of my depression had lifted. I had suffered a lot of depression even in sobriety, but it was lifting, it was changing. There were a whole lot of things going on in my body riding that bicycle across the country in the middle of the summer. I got up on those Rocky Mountains and I was pedaling through these mountains, and there was a lightning storm. And there was no rain, just lightning, lighting up the night, flashing across the mountains. Brilliant, beautiful revelation of God and His glory. And I felt this unity between me and the gift of my body that God gave to me to be healthy and to be whole and to be strong and to be alive and to be at one with the beauty of His creation. It was transformational. That depression was lifted from me. I finished the trip. I got to California. I came back to Emory, and I went straight to the Emory Christian Fellowship when school started. And I started hanging around those Christian kids because something had happened to me on that trip. And those Christian kids had something going on, and I wanted to be a part of what they had going on. At the same time, I met a co-ed who was an actress. And she had a little different lifestyle than the Emory Christian Fellowship did. So I was a little confused about which direction I wanted to go. I tried to do both. I know that sounds crazy, like who would try to do that? Who would try to live the bohemian life with the beautiful actress and hang out with the Emory Christian Fellowship kids and do the Bible studies and pray and sing the song? Who would try to do both of those things? I would. Well, she started to have some success in her career, and she wound up hanging out with all these rock stars, and she left me. Are you getting the idea that getting left and having some heartache is part of Dave's story? It's in there. So she left me. And in the middle of that, we had an engagement. We had a wedding planned. We were all ready to get married. And she was gone. And in the middle of all that, I heard this. I'm not the kind of person that hears God's voice, but it's kind of like that this time, in this moment, in this pain that I was in. It was like God's voice said, go to the Catholic Center at Emory. Because I'd gone to California to try to get better with some friends. And said, go back to school and go to the Catholic Center. Why would I go to the Catholic Center? I don't know anything about Catholic. I don't know anything about church. I don't know anything about any of that. But I did. I had this peace in my heart that sent me back to the Catholic Center. And I went in there and I asked this theologian there named Tim Muldoon. I told him a little bit about my story and I said, do y'all do anything for anything like that around here? Can y'all help with a situation like that? And he just grinned and he said, absolutely. You're in the right place. We can help you here. And so I became Catholic. And I decided that I wanted less of that heartache and misery, and I wanted to see what I could find out about God's plan, particularly God's plan for love and for sex and for marriage. And so I started studying John Paul II's love and responsibility and theology of the body. And that's what came out of that heartache. That's what came out of what seemed like a tragedy. And it might seem like too big of a word, tragedy, for getting dumped by an actress, but it sure felt like a tragedy at the time. And I felt in my heart, and this might not be real, but I felt like it was a tragedy that I was going to be alone for a long time. I just felt that. And it was 20 years. It was 20 years. 20 years of diving into the beauty and the goodness and the power and the passion of the theology of the body and all the teachings of John Paul the Great, and traveling around and being a part of the lives of people like you, and sharing good news with people like you, and praying together with people like Janice. So I want to share with you a little bit about this journey through these years of being alone and being lonely. When I graduated with my degree in creative writing, I bought a van and set it up for living in, because that's what you should do with a degree in creative writing if you're being honest about things. And I got a pit bull to live with me in the van. And I traveled around and I performed theatrical pieces and storytelling and poetry readings and goofy performance art and coffee houses and nightclubs and little theaters and stuff like that. And I decided I wanted to start going to church. And I became Catholic my senior year at Cannon Chapel at Emory. I'd never even been in a Catholic church. I didn't know anything about a Catholic church, and I was Catholic. So where am I going to go? Well, I'll go to the cathedral down in Buckhead. I need a place to park my van at night. They got a good parking lot here. So I'm going to park here, and there's a pond right around the corner for my dog to run around and chase ducks, and this is going to be good. So I'm going to go to the cathedral. It's going to be a little tricky to fit in with some of these people here at the cathedral in Buckhead, living in my van with my pit bull, doing performance art. But I had an ace in the hole. I knew something tremendously valuable that I'd learned in my 12-step meetings. And I'm going to tell you how that went. I started going to the Life in the Spirit seminar, which was run by Carrie Allen, who lives right up the street next to Janice, who is an amazing woman, like not a normal person, a special, special person. She was running this Life in the Spirit seminar. She's a special person, but she had a horrible sound system, just like Janice did when she started Theology on Tap here in Atlanta. That's who started Theology on Tap in Atlanta, Janice. So Carrie had a horrible sound system there. I had a nice sound system in my van. So I said, how about if I bring my sound system to the Life in the Spirit seminar? She said, sure. So now I'm coming early to set up the sound system, right? And I'm sticking around late afterwards to break down the sound system. So I got connected to the people there at the Life in the Spirit seminar. The key that I had already learned in my 12-step meetings is if you want to change your life, it's not going to happen by just showing up sometimes. Life transformation isn't going to happen by just sitting in the chair sometimes or sitting in the pew sometimes. This is how life transformation happens. I don't know if anybody here wants to change your life, but if there is anybody here who wants to change your life, I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. And I'm not going to tell you that it's easy, but I will tell you that it works. And that is, you find people that are on fire, people that care, people that have passion, people that know God and have His Spirit alive and living in them. You study their habits, you see where they hang out, and then you come often and you come early, you stay late, and you find a way to serve. You come often, you come early, you stay late, and you find a way to serve. That is a good one to write down. You come often, you come early, you stay late, and you find a way to serve. I've been telling that to people for a long time. And they come back to me later, sometimes 5, 10, 15 years later. They say, Dave, I did it. I started coming often and coming early and staying late and finding a way to serve. And it did change my life. And it'll do that for you. So I got to know Carrie. I got to know Carrie that was running the Life in the Spirit seminar and the rest of her friends there. And we got close. And she said, you know what, Dave? We have a lot of tragedy in our family. We have a lot of brokenness. And my husband and I just adopted our grandkids. They're 1, 3, 5, and 7. And you want to come by the house sometime and visit, play with the kids. I wound up moving in with them, helping to raise those kids. And my lonely heart, my hard heart was melted by the love of those children. One of the most beautiful, extraordinary things that could happen to a person in their life, to be brought into this family. Bob and Carrie are the most amazing Christians, evangelists, parents, grandparents. They set an example. They showed me, they taught me how to parent. I don't worry at all about raising my kids. I have a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old at home. I got nothing to worry about. Bob and Carrie taught me how to do it. Took Samantha and her sisters and her brother out to the Chattahoochee River one afternoon when Samantha was about 4. We're sitting out there on the rocks. The sun is getting ready to go down, and it's just shimmering on the water. I said, Samantha, look. Look at the shimmers. Look at the light. And Samantha turned and looked at the light, and she looked at it and looked at it. And then she turned to me and she said, the sparkles are in love with me. I was just struck. I felt like she'd been studying John Paul the Great. How did she know this? Finally, I said, Samantha, you're right. The sparkles are in love with you. But how did you know that? And she turned and she looked at them some more. And then she turned back and she said, because they want to marry me. And they already did. That came from coming often, coming early, and staying late. And that's the treasure that came out of the tragedy of being alone and being left and entering into the tragedy in Bob and Carrie's and their families' lives. So now I want to talk with you. All that other stuff I don't really care about. I'm just here to help you get married, is really what I care about. I just care about dating and courtship and helping you do that. Because it's hard and people struggle with it and people are heartbroken. And I know more than you do about how to do it wrong. I did it wrong longer than you've done it wrong. I'm not saying any of you did it wrong. But if you did, I've done it wrong longer and more and worse. And then I studied how to do it right. And I learned a lot about how to do it right from the greatest teacher that ever walked the planet of the earth on this subject, the prophet that God sent to teach it, John Paul the Great. So I'm going to tell you what I learned from him. I'm going to tell you my take on it. And sometimes you're going to go, I don't know about that. And sometimes you're going to say, Dave, I don't know if John Paul the Great wrote it that way. And I'm telling you my take on it, okay? You don't have to buy it. You might find some nuggets in it that you like. You might find something in what I'm going to share with you that's good or that makes sense to you. A lot of people disagree on this stuff. A lot of people in the church are confused about this stuff. A lot of people have all sorts of ideas about dating and courtship. So there's a tremendous amount of confusion for all kinds of good reasons, right? So I'm not saying that you have to do it the way that I recommend. You don't. A lot of people are married, having wonderful families. Janice did it her way. It's a little bit different. She didn't follow all of my instructions. So people have different ways of doing this. But I want to share with you some good news for the simple reason that I think it is good news. I just think it's good news, and I think what you're doing is hard. Trying to get married in this culture with all of the brokenness out there is hard. And I think some of you have had your hearts broken along the way. And I want you to know that you can be restored, you can be redeemed, you can be healed, you can find joy, and you can find the person that God has planned for you, and you can have a little 1-year-old at home partying, waiting on you to come home. Excited to see you. Daddy, 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 daddy. So I just want you to have this. So what I'm going to share with you is my thought about how to get it. And it starts out with finding healing and finding joy that you can't get from your spouse. Finding it first. Being ready. Being the person that the spouse you're looking for is looking for. I want you to be ready. Not perfect. You don't have to be perfect or anywhere even close. But you have to have some solid healing. And you have to have this fellowship of people from coming off and coming early and staying late and serving. You got to have that fellowship of people around you. That's the baseline, okay? And you have to have a sense of, you know what? I'm growing in joy. I'm becoming more joyful. I'm having more of an experience of Christ in my life. I'm experiencing redemption. I'm seeing what happens when tragedy gets turned into treasure. I'm believing that God can do this in my life. You need to be there. The stuff I want to share with you about dating and courtship won't work otherwise. And I'll just go ahead. Y'all are Jesus freaks. You're hanging out here at a retreat. I'll just go ahead and dive in and tell you what you really got to do is you got to get a clue when it comes to purity, when it comes to chastity. I'm going to give you some very encouraging news. I talked to friends of mine about dating, been talking to them about dating for years. The ones that are living a chaste life, the ones that are doing this purity thing, I have very good news for them. I tell them, love without fear. Don't be afraid. There's a payoff for chastity. Chastity means that you can pursue a dating courtship relationship and you don't have to be afraid that something bad's going to happen, because it's not. It's not. You might get hurt some. That's okay. You can take that. You're not going to get broken. You're not going to get shattered. You're not going to have something terrible happen because you try to love somebody when you're doing it God's way. When you're following the plan that He gave us, you can have confidence and you can love without fear. If there's somebody that you think you should date, you can date them. If there's somebody you think, should I say yes, should I don't know, you can say yes. You don't have to be living in fear. Chastity is not about staying out of trouble and not doing the bad stuff. Chastity is about perfect love, cast out all fear. Chastity is about the freedom to love and the confidence and the boldness to pursue love, knowing that no matter what happens in this dating and courtship relationship, you two are going to help each other get closer to Jesus. For sure. That's a win. That's a victory. That's a guaranteed victory. I'm going to guarantee you victory in every dating relationship you'll ever have. Victory. 100% guaranteed. Because this is God's plan. For certain. It's certain that He gave you this attraction to each other so that you can help each other get closer to Him. That is absolutely certain. So you date somebody that wants to do that. You date somebody that has a clue about chastity and wants to help you get closer to heaven. And you'll both be able to accomplish that. So I told my wife this story. After we'd been dating a few weeks, she decided to break up with me. And I knew she was going to break up with me because she started sending me text messages that weren't all lovey-dovey, right? So I knew she was going to break up with me that night when I saw her. So we got together that night, and I told her what I just told y'all. And it made a big impression on her. I said, nothing bad's going to happen. You can break up with me, that's fine. But you don't have to, because nothing bad's going to happen here. We can try this out and we can see what God has planned, and it's going to be fine. If we don't stay together, I'll go to a different church for a few weeks, and then I'll be right back at the cathedral, and we'll both see each other and smile and know that we're good for each other. We treated each other the way we ought to be treated, that God's pleased with how we've treated one another. And she liked that. And she also liked the fact that for our breakup date, I brought her chocolate and flowers and a card and her favorite kind of ice cream in a cooler I had in the back seat. All that helped too. All that helped along with the chastity speech. So a little bit of good news about dating and courtship. I hope that's good news right there. You can do this dating and courtship thing fearlessly, and you can be confident that God's in it and God's with you. It's possible to be chaste. It's possible to do this. Since I'm talking about chastity, I'm going to go ahead and continue on that theme a little bit. What does it mean? What does it look like? People want to know, like I have a friend of mine, he's dating this girl and they're not kissing and they're about to get engaged and they haven't kissed and these are his rules. And people do this all different kinds of ways. So I want to give you a couple of, I think, really helpful principles. I think that the guardrails have to be in our heart. They have to be in our heart. And here's an example of what that looks like. When you're together, it should always be okay to pray. No matter where you are, what you're doing, who you're with, it should always be okay to pray. Don't get in a situation. Don't do anything where you don't feel like praying. If you don't feel like praying, stop it. Run. Do something different. Pour your 32-ounce Coke over your head. Do something so that you can change the station and start praying. It always needs to be okay to pray in every situation, in every encounter. And the other thing is that there's a really critical difference between affection and desire. Affection is where we want to camp out when we're in dating and courtship. When we're being close, when we're in the snuggle zone, when we're having a three-quarter cuddle with a semi-snuggle, and then we seamlessly segue into the full frontal snuggle zone, when all this stuff happens, we want to be in the affection place. The affection place. When that goes into desire, it's not where we belong. Desire doesn't belong in dating and courtship. It belongs in marriage. Desire, sexual desire, is to lead us toward intercourse. That's what it's for. It has a purpose. And that doesn't belong in dating and courtship. So we want to steer clear of desire. And I'm not telling you exactly what that looks like in every different situation. But it's in your heart, and Jesus will show you. He'll help you know. And you don't have to understand any of this perfectly, because if you did, you'd be a weirdo. Okay? You don't understand all this perfectly. But you care. You trust God. You have this joy in your heart, and try to stay there and doing the things that are leading you toward this closeness with the one who's the source of joy. Now, what I want to talk about next is, how do we know who to date? How do we know who to date? And I'm going to suggest to you two criteria, two that I think everything else that matters fits within these two. One is attraction, and the other is virtue. Those two are huge. There's a whole lot there in attraction. A lot of people are wondering what attraction means. Does attraction matter? How attracted do we need to be? So I want to share with you a little bit about attraction. So I have a friend. She was dating this guy recently, and when she first started dating him, she was really fired up. She thought this was great. She was all excited. She was telling me about how great this guy was. And after they'd been dating for a while, she started telling me she didn't know if she was attracted to him enough. Didn't think that he was necessarily the right one for her to marry, for her to stay with. And I said, well, I thought you were attracted to this guy. You told me you were. He's a virtuous guy. You trust him. You think he'd be a good husband. She said, yeah, but I think I might get bored with him. I don't know if this is somebody I want to spend my life with. I don't feel that chemistry. I don't feel that fire. And here's my concern in a situation like that. Some of us have gotten confused about the newness, the excitement of a new relationship, and the attraction that brings. That brings a special kind of attraction, right? When we're in a new relationship, there's this special kind of energy. Some of us have gotten addicted to that. And we've gotten confused about that. And we've thought that that's the real chemistry. That's the real energy. That's what we're really supposed to be after. Well, that's a terrible place to be. You don't want to be in that place where you feel like you have to have all that energy of somebody new. And another thing we don't want to get into is, you know who can give you that excitement and that enthusiasm of a new relationship over the long term? You know who can do that? It's a crazy person. A crazy person that you have no idea what they're going to do next. They can keep that enthusiasm, they can keep that excitement, they can keep that drama of a new relationship going over the long term. I'm speaking from personal experience, from having dated that person and having been that crazy person. Been on both sides of that equation. So that's not what we're after. Attraction means that when I see her walking toward me, I like that. I like that. When she's coming my way, I like that. I want her to be sitting in the seat next to me. That looks good to me. That is attraction. So we want to have attraction. Attraction's important. The Song of Solomon, you have ravished my heart, my sister, my bride. And she responds, oh, that you would kiss me with the kisses of your mouth. Passion, attraction, these things are important. But they need to be in their place, and we don't need to be exaggerating them and getting confused about what they mean. Now I want to segue to the next criterion that we should look for, and that's virtue. We could also call that true charity. True charity. A whole lot of things fit in that category. What it doesn't mean is somebody that's checking all the boxes of doing all the religious things. Those things hopefully are leading somebody toward virtue, toward true charity. So it's good to do those things. I'm not saying don't do them, but that's not what we're looking for. We're looking for true charity, which means somebody has a heart that can give, a heart that can share. And you know how we cannot figure that out? Based on how they treat us in a new relationship. It's been said the first 6 months we date somebody, we're dating their representative. So we need more information than how they treat us. So what we want to do is we want to look around and see, is this person coming often, coming early, staying late, and serving? Are they involved? Are they connected? We also want to say, how does this person treat people who are suffering, people who don't have much to offer? How do they treat the person who is bussing the tables? How do they treat the person who cleans the bathroom at their office building? How do they treat folks that don't have a whole lot to give? Because right now this person thinks I have a whole lot to give. That's why they're wanting to date me. But the time's going to come when I don't have a whole lot to give. How are they going to treat me then? I can tell by how they treat others who don't have a whole lot to give. Another way to think about it is I want to look for somebody who is, if it's a man, I want to look for a man who's living as an authentic spiritual son, brother, and father in his life in the church as part of God's family. I can see examples of him living that way. I want to look for a woman who's living as an authentic spiritual daughter, sister, mother, as she's living out her life in God's family. I want to see how she interacts with other people in all of these different environments and all of these different ways. And that's going to show me whether she has true charity. True charity is what we're looking for. Not somebody with a good heart that would love me if she could, but she's so full of anxiety that she can't. What I'm looking for somebody is somebody who has true charity. Marital love, nuptial love is reciprocal. It has to be give and take. It has to go both ways, or it's not marital love. Marital love is not unconditional. That's not marital love. Marital love is reciprocal. It goes both ways. It doesn't mean that people don't ebb and flow and have difficulties and struggles over time, but you're not going to form a marriage together with somebody who can't reciprocate. You're looking for this joy that comes from living the gospel. Somebody who has this joy in their heart, and it needs to be in your heart as well. Okay, getting to the end. So there's something that I see that keeps people from getting married. And people, I'm talking about people that are sincere, that are committed Christians, that are trying to do things the right way. The rest of the people out there in the world, God bless them and good luck to them. You know, I don't have a whole lot of good news for them about what to expect. But for Christians that are trying to do things the right way, I see something that's getting in the way. And that is, I see folks that, and this might sound harsh. I don't want to sound harsh. This stuff is hard and people are struggling, and I'm not trying to lay a burden on you and make things harder. I just want you to win. I want you to be able to go home and have that 1-year-old saying, "Daddy, daddy, daddy, daddy." I want you to have, when I go home, after dinner, I lay down on the couch and chill, and my wife comes and lays on top of me, and both of my daughters come and lay on top of me, and we have a big snuggle party. And then my 4-year-old says she wants to have a dance party. And then we all get up and dance. That's what I want your life to look like. So I'm not trying to lay some kind of trip on you like you're not doing this thing right. That's not the point. I'm just trying to help. And if any of this is helpful, then great. I see people not getting married because they won't marry any of the people that will marry them. Rocket science, right? They won't marry any, they only want to marry the people who won't marry them, right? We just talked about virtue, but they've gotten confused on the attraction thing. They've gotten this attraction thing out of whack. They're not attracted to any of the people that will marry them. They're only attracted to people that won't marry them. That's a bad equation. So we need to recalibrate and think some more about what it is that we're looking for. They have this fear of missing out by not having somebody that has all of these qualities that they think they're attracted to. That's the wrong fear of missing out. I'm not saying there shouldn't be any attraction there, but some of us have gotten confused about what that requires. Some of us aren't capable of being attracted maybe as much as God would like to help us be attracted. John Paul II wrote, "A human being is beautiful and can be revealed as being beautiful." There's a lot of beauty out there in the world if we know how to see it, if our hearts are full of joy. So we need to learn how to be attracted to who God will allow us to be attracted to, not just to people that won't marry us. And we need to be afraid of missing out, not on all that fire, all that energy, all that spark, all that electricity. We need to be afraid of missing out on going home to that 1-year-old that's running saying, "Daddy, daddy, 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 daddy." We need to be afraid of missing out on that 4-year-old that's saying, "That's enough of the snuggle huddle. Can we have our dance party now?" And get up and start the dance party. Jesus is the center of human life. He's the center of human history. He's the bridegroom who hangs on the cross, giving himself to us, his bride, the church. And he points in one direction to a wedding at the beginning of history. between the first man and the first woman. And he says it's very good. And he points in the other direction at a wedding at the end of time that the beloved disciple describes this way. He says, I heard the sound of many voices, of many waters, mighty thunder peals, proclaiming that the wedding of the Lamb has come. His bride has made herself ready, dressed in fine linen, bright and pure. The fine linen is the righteous deeds of the saints. The Spirit and the bride say, come. Let him who desires come. Let him who thirsts drink of the water of life without price. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. Thank you for listening. God bless you.
Amen.